Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wall Street Hackers, one of the popular shows on the Pod TV network, where we discuss the markets, which is the stock market, investing, of course, Peter's picks, stock market quotes, and also the stories of the week. And so this way you can actually learn about what's going on in the investment world, because that education is not provided in your high schools or your universities. So we provide it here on the Pod TV network. With that, we're going to bring in the hacker himself, a graduate of UCLA with a degree in economics, a law degree from the University of Miami, and also a master's in business administration degree from NYU. Spending 17 years working in New York City, person who actually understands the market, none other than the hacker himself, Peter Bennett. Peter, welcome to your show. And I always look forward to the updates because investing requires time, thought, energy, and direction. You have to know timing is important. When and where you should get out. So we're very interested in listening to your monologue and your thoughts about the U.S. stock market.
Well, thanks for the compliment, Nick. And so welcome to Wall Street Hackers, September 2nd, 2025. You can catch a new episode at our new time. We've moved it to 6 o'clock because we got lawyers in. We slid to the side because we have a much bigger audience at Wall Street Hackers. And so we'll be starting 6 o'clock or whenever you catch it, depending on your distribution channel. But Tuesdays at 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time most weeks. That said, we're going to take a break. So we'll have a show the week of September 8th. And then I believe we'll be back October 7th, but I didn't have time to check with Nick if he's available that week. But somewhere around October 7th, I won't be available until then. So see you then. And we start with the markets as always. So Wall Street Hackers has predicted the market to grow slowly over the next 10 years. And since November, it looks like that's coming true. Not just our prediction. I mean, Goldman Sachs has said the similar, Charles Schwab, JP Morgan. It doesn't mean there's no opportunities in the market for investment, but you really, more than ever, it's more important than ever to pick the right sectors and the right companies. Stock allocation is going to be critical because the averages for the market are almost certainly not going to be as strong for the next 10 years, the next 15 or 20 years probably. And there's a lot of reasons for that than they have been. So it's always important, but more important than ever. Here's some examples of the current mixed messages on the market. There's a lot of uncertainty right now. And it was always going to be the case as the national debt starts catching up with us and worldwide debt starts catching up with other countries. So here's some mixed messages. These are selected quotes just from this last week's Barron's. 1, fall forecast, stocks rally will broaden what to buy now. Magnificent Seven trade, which favored Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, and Tesla, looks to be waning in popularity after driving the major indexes for 2 years. Investors should focus on instead interest rate sensitive sectors such as financials and industrials, beaten down value stocks in the healthcare sector and small caps. Not only are most of those stocks cheaper than big tech, except, first of all, the market was driven by the Magnificent Seven for the reason that they had potential growth, but the other companies weren't growing that much because they didn't have that much growth, and there were macroeconomic issues, including inflation, national debt, and other issues, and those issues are still there. So there's certainly no guarantee that all of a sudden these other sectors will be booming. I'm especially cautious about healthcare because I think as the population ages, Medicare gets closer to deficit situation where the funds run out, there's going to be more and more pressure on the drug companies, and it's already been being applied. So the other thing is that we do like Amazon. That's the only tech company I'm going to stick with. I think they're the most conservative and have the most potential for growth. If you listen to the which you will, the most interesting story of the week, you'll say, wait a minute, is the big tech Magnificent Seven, do they even deserve the prior growth? So here's another story from the same magazine, Barron's. Why is the stock market ignoring Jack Bogle's iron rule? the rule is that stock prices revert to a mean. This is kind of a mathematical thing, and it's been long accepted principle. So what this article talks about is that since we've had years of outperformance, the reversion to mean would be slower growth, and that often happens. And furthermore, the same article argues, an analyst or two, I'm not sure if it was one or two, but they argue that the rise of passive investing has been driving the S&P and kept it going up. But the analyst, quote, believes that mean expansion grossly inflates equity valuations, which worries him. Quote, I've modeled this stuff out, and unfortunately, all the models say you end up with a horrific crash. I don't know if there's going to be a horrific crash or not, but I think the market is valued extremely high, and most people think that. So how do you get outperformance? I'm not sure in terms of the macro market. And of course, this is what makes market, I would add. Everybody has their own opinion, but there are definitely issues. Meanwhile, in more concrete news, the data-dependent Fed, quote, data-dependent Fed, is waiting for key data this week. And it's been really difficult to interpret the data because the last few months' jobs data has been revised in massive ways and has been unusually and very extraordinarily volatile. So the August jobs report is about to come out, and people are saying it could show 200,000 gain, and July could be revised maybe down 50,000, and August could come in at 10,000. So nobody knows, because this has been some of the most erratic numbers I've seen in terms of the data coming out. And as a result of this, in August, probably deservedly so, President Trump fired Eric McTarnick forget it, the commissioner of Bureau of Labor Statistics, because of the very erratic job reports. And meanwhile, the market was sparking criticism, saying, if this is the data, this could really undermine the whole credibility of the Fed, at least, not to mention that would undermine the whole economic system. So it'll be very interesting to see what the data comes out this week, high, low, or in the middle, who knows. In any case, leaving that on a half-glass full note, none of this really affects Wall Street Hackers' strategy, which is, I want to buy businesses that have good cash flows, dividends and income, growing dividends, and that way the income protects you in a lot of ways, because you don't want to sell it anyway as long as it's a good business, no matter what the valuation is. If you owned a dry cleaner and a grocery store and they're generating money, you're not saying, oh, every day, what is it worth? So it's a good strategy, and it's historically proven by hundreds of years of studies, Hartford Funds and several other studies. I mean, the dividend companies far outperformed it. Energy tends to outperform, and I've seen vast outperformance by selected MLPs and REITs. So we'll stay with our strategy no matter what the macroeconomic environment, because we're not going to put it all in CDs. Quote of the week. This is a really interesting one from today's New York Post. That's September 2nd. Economist, it's debt sapping Fed independence. Quote, concerns about the Federal Reserve's independence have grown following repeated attacks by President Trump. But the debate is too narrowly focused on the president's political pressure, ignoring a growing danger in our system, namely the national debt, and Congress's tax and spend policies which create it. Pressure on the Fed will continue no matter who's president, thanks to the fiscal trajectory that was locked in years ago. It's not whether Fed boss Jerome Powell or his successor will resist Trump's demand, but whether Congress will behave in a way that allows the Fed to do its job. Well, it's not quite that simple, because, again, the Congress has inherited, and President Trump has inherited, really mismanagement with off-the-books liabilities for Medicare and Social Security. And this was just kicked down the road forever. And now we're getting close to the point when they're going to run out of money, maybe in 7 years each in 2033. And, the years are getting short to manage this massive, massive debt. Again, Wall Street Hacker says, based on a former control of the currency, that we probably have $125 trillion in debt and obligations, because of the book's obligations, not the 36 or 37 trillion every day. But he's talking about, you can't ignore the rest. It will affect things. Okay, so why President Trump or somebody in the White House should give me a call segment. I'll keep this one short because we got a lot of material this week. Again, my 30-page report called The Pathway to Fiscal Stability. Congress accepted and did, I don't know if they read it or not, but they did use about half the ideas in the report, probably just thought of them themselves. But there was the other half that are really major, massive ideas. Many of them could be much bigger than DOGE. Just one page of reforms could be much bigger than DOGE. But so far, no calls. They probably know how to get me. I think they can figure it out. Most interesting report of the segment. We mentioned this last week. Really interesting report. And Wall Street Hackers has said, it looks to us like AI is probably overhyped in the short and medium term. In the long run, we're still going to have maybe 1 billion robots on this planet. I think, I have to look this up, but I think JP Morgan or somebody was saying like 500 million robots by 2050 or 1 billion. Huge amount of robots, but it's still way behind the trajectory that the market is thinking. So here's a report by, it says From Technology by Zach Kaplan, 8/20/25. Companies have invested billions into AI, 95% getting zero return. Quotes, there have been over 30 billion in enterprise investments into generative AI. 5% of integrated AI pilots are extracting millions in value. AI systems fail due to their inability to learn and think in ways humans can. So I think AI is personally hyped. Personally, I cannot stand it when I call a lot of companies, a brokerage company, a travel company, whatever, and I get AI. I say, get me a representative. And my favorite line is, AI doesn't work, AI rots, ... And that's how you get, by the way, AI off the phone, because mostly it's a waste. Once in a while, I'm amazed when it helps. Another footnote on that is MIT is probably a pretty reliable source. And so we will see what happens. But the market is built on a quick model of AI progress. And a lot of these companies may be saying, you know what, we're not going to waste our time anymore. And from what I can see, a lot of these companies are actually hurting at least their customer relations with useless AI that doesn't understand things and isn't logical at all. So it has its purposes and will save companies money. It'll certainly save Amazon some money, and it is already, but we'll see what happens. Dividend investment of the week. Disclosure, as always, Wall Street Hackers is for entertainment only. These are only their opinions. There are no guarantees on any of our suggestions, except, by the way, treasuries and munis, which we like now, and only if you hold them to maturity. Consult your financial advisor. So, and by the way, only as part of your portfolio, obviously, depending on your risk tolerance. So this week we turn to our basic dividend strategy with LAMR, Lamar Advertising, where we have a small allocation. The main reason we have a small allocation is I love MPLX so much, and that's where I want to put most of my equity risk. But Lamar is an outdoor advertising company. It has 363,000 billboards and displays across the U.S. and Canada. So I like U.S. and Canada, especially U.S. I still think we're going to be the dominant player down the road. Billboards are a pretty safe business, safer than you think. You think billboards are subject to economic disruption, and there is to a point true, but only 20% of their advertisers are national. 80% of their businesses that put up their advertising on their boards are local. So your local guy, a local lawyer, local healthcare provider, whoever it is probably not going to be pulling their billboards if they're generating income. So they are economically sensitive to a point, but much less than many companies. And they have a 4.9% dividend yield and a reasonable cash flow. It's 13.8 price over cash flow, which is 7.2% cash flow yield. And they're growing at a reasonable rate, over 3% on sales and earnings growth of 4%. So for a dividend of 4.9, and they have a great, by the way, dividend growth history. So if they just continue to grow, I'll take 4.9% growing in most economic scenarios as a diversifier, and looks pretty solid overall, again, for a small allocation. So we get to the panel question of the week. Nick, if you'd come on.
Yes, Peter.
Hey, Nick. Okay, so the question is, how can progressives possibly believe what they say? Background. Socialism has failed in hundreds, if not thousands, of experiments for hundreds, if not thousands of years. This can be researched. Google it. Does socialism work? There's only been one well-known exception, which is the Scandinavian countries. But first of all, they have a mixed socialist and capitalist system. But also, what people miss is they are extremely rich in natural resources. So they have a lot of rich farmland, fisheries, forests, and they've been relying on North Sea oil and gas for decades. However, on the other side, the North Sea is in what's called peak oil. In other words, they're running out of oil gradually, and the Norwegian production peaked at peak oil in 2004, and it's in a gradual downward trend. So, you know what? It's easy to be partially socialism when you have all these rich resources, and especially oil and gas. But what happens when you don't have as much resources? We'll see. And again, one experiment that's well known out of, who knows, thousands, depending on how you measure it. I mean, it's just case after case of failure. This week, two different stories on these progressives. One short one. Representative Omar of Minnesota, who's a very radical progressive, reported a net worth of up to $30 million. Kind of like AOC and a lot of these progressives who are like equality for all, but I want to be rich. But even worse, $30 million, up to $30 million. And she very recently discussed her net worth and denied she was a millionaire. Again, my thing is Democrats need to start with just telling the truth, you know, if they want to rebuild credibility. And it's not good for their party if they don't. Credibility is number one. We're in the information age. Then we turn to Zohran Mamdani, who is likely going to be the next New York City mayor. So here's a list of 8 questions which he was asked that the campaign absolutely refused to answer. And they did answer some, but these are some of the questions that people might want to know the answer to. Number 1, will you end the use of police and school safety officers in school? Kind of important. Will you end, I'll stop saying will you, end teacher evaluations on the basis of standardized testing? Allocate funds to push DEI in public schools. Establish universal rent control. Universal, we're saying everybody gets rent control. Allow for trans minors access to transition-related care without parental consent. Allow New York City to seize land for housing. Seize land. They won't say no. We won't let them seize land. Abolish the Board of Elections. They won't answer whether they'll abolish the Board of Elections. So this is a good one. Will you allow people to be charged as youthful offenders up to age 26? Refuse to respond. They won't say that. No. So they're going to say, you're 25, you killed somebody. We'll treat you as a youthful offender. Just brilliant strategies. So they answered a few questions, and none of the answers look good too. But Nick, how can progressives possibly believe what they're saying?
Well, obviously they do, or they wouldn't be in certain positions. But if you look at Venezuela, because you were saying, well, these are oil-rich countries, like in the Nordic countries, so they can afford socialism. Well, that's not really true, because the thing is, you can be an oil-rich country. The richest oil country in the world is Venezuela. It has more proven reserves than any other country, including Saudi Arabia, the U.S., Canada, yet they're completely broke. Why are they completely broke? It's because they brought in this socialist guy who believed that he didn't need the oil companies and that they could do it themselves. And so all the intellectual property left, and they had a bunch of idiots, and they couldn't get the oil out of the ground. They couldn't sell it. They couldn't do anything. Now Venezuela is one of the most poorest countries in
Absolutely.
Latin
Good
America.
example. Good
So
example.
that's a good example of a horrible decision by the Venezuelans to elect this
Mhm.
guy to be the president, and they're suffering for it. But it's not my problem, at least not right now. The other thing we saw is North and South Korea. Look at what North Korea has done. Nothing. South Korea has done really well under the capitalistic system.
Oh,
So
good point.
if
Yeah.
you look at the examples around the world, you'll see. And when I was in Prague a couple weeks ago, they were so happy, and the city is like one of the best cities in the
Booming.
world to
Yeah.
be
Yeah. Booming.
because the Soviets moved out. So now here's what will happen to New York City. If you want to be a Prague and be one of the best cities in the world, you don't want to elect this idiot. If you want to be a Venezuela where people are poor and starving and they beat their chest
Right.
on how great they are in being progressive, then vote that guy in. If they voted the guy in and I was a New Yorker, I would sell and leave. Frankly, I would sell and leave right now because they're even thinking about bringing somebody that's that stupid in New York City. And can New York City get worse? Absolutely. It was in the 70s. I went up there in the 70s. Crime was rampant everywhere. The place was a hellhole. It was like one of
Oh, yeah.
the worst places in the world to live. So this guy gets elected, I can guarantee you this. New York City will be one of the worst places in the world to visit and one of the worst places in the world to live. So
Really great points. So even before I get into my points, I have to cover a
Right.
bunch of your points that are really great. Number one, yeah, New York City is not immune. They're doing really well. Businesses have been moving there even with the current policies. But uh, back in the 80s, 70s, my uncle bought a brownstone in um, Park Slope for $40,000. It's worth many millions now. It's like three or four stories, I guess 3 stories in a basement. I mean, the thing is probably worth $3 million, $4 million. Brooklyn prices are through the roof. But he bought it for 40,000 because nobody knew if New York City was going to survive and
Mhm.
whether Park Slope would survive. It is possible to return. The second point is, yes, brilliant on South and North Korea. Two countries with similar resources, different paths, poverty versus prosperity, no comparison. Back to New York. I just heard today prices in Connecticut and northern New York are soaring. And they said Rhinebeck, New York, Connecticut. People are already moving out of New York who have money and saying, what if this happens? You know, it's like I'm getting out of here as soon as I can. There's going to be a rush to the gate. And New York is one reason New York has prospered is because there's so many rich people there. They don't care if they're overtaxed, you know, they're very wealthy. But if crime starts soaring, if policies change, taxes go up, eventually, and a lot of businesses are moving south to Florida and other places. So, and the last point is Venezuela. One quick point, and this just shows you right away. Venezuela had a thriving economy. Oil was a big part of it, and then the communists, socialists, whatever you want to call them, came in, and very soon after the war, this is you can't argue with math. The average Venezuelan lost 19 pounds in 1 year. And that wasn't because they were on Wegovy or on a diet. They were starving. And it's continued since then. 19 pounds per person on average. That means somebody lost more than that. A lot of people. That was just the average. What a horrible situation. So my conclusion back to the answer was, how can they believe this? Number one, there's always been socialism in the United States and worldwide. People just think, oh, equality is great. And capitalism has its flaws, so they can exploit that. But we also have a public system, school system that leans left a lot of times and is very poor in a lot of ways, underperforming in a lot of ways for certain mathematically. We have a college system that definitely is left, a lot of hippies in professorships. And these professors live like socialist kings, making a lot of times 6 figures. And then it comes off the back of the middle class, the upper middle class, who pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to colleges that support these professors in their, you know, I teach 3 classes and do research roles. And then the media, of course, 90% of the US media, also probably pretty well reporters, but people who went through this college system who are lean heavily left. So a lot of the information previously has been based that way. The only thing is we're in the information age. And now podcasts, conservative media at least has an outlet. and I'm not that I agree with them on everything, but they don't have a monopoly anymore. So things are changing, and clearly, if you look at the direction, it's changing. And also, the other thing is human nature, which is once somebody has a paradigm or their belief system, it's really hard to change them. I've talked to people on various issues, and once they had their belief system, it's like, I don't even want to look at any information that disrupts my paradigm. I refuse to look at it. I hate that other information. But all people have to really do in this age is Google the other side and expand their horizons. You have to keep an open mind. I look at all media. I know what I believe more is on the conservative side, because especially on like an MSNBC or CNN, where they just mostly say anything that to further their agenda, which is to educate, quote, the society, which reminds me of other governments who educate their people. But in reality, you have to look at information and objectively. So it's sort of human nature, but I think in the end, these progressives are hurting the Democratic Party in a huge way by pushing out moderates, by taking positions that 80%, 75% of people think are crazy on positions like crime and parents controlling their kids' lives in schools and things like that. So hopefully the country is heading the right way, but we have a massive debt problem, and somebody has got to handle that. Any last comments, Nick?
Yeah, since we do have a massive debt problem, toward the end of September, apparently we have another financial crisis coming on that they have to increase the size of the national debt. There's some pundits that saying that they're not going to get the votes to do that. Would that create havocs in the market, Peter? Is that possible?
A couple of points. One, I think the Democrats are going to make a showing of closing the government. It hasn't worked for either side, I believe, ever, because people don't like it when all of a sudden their government agency can't be reached or whatever. Now, certain things will probably be maintained, like Social Security payments, I expect Medicare and essential services, but people will blame somebody for this if they're personally affected. And history shows that the party that's slowing it down, especially if the other party controls the White House, which is the bully pulpit, as they call it. So my guess is the Democrats will make a show of it to their liberal base, just to make them happy. But in the end, I think they'll get really hurt by it if it lasts more than 7 days or something like that. I don't know. I'm just guessing, because in the end, people are going to get really angry at them, and President Trump will divert anger to them, which is rightfully so. And neither party has done it very long. And again, they have to make a showing because there's so many progressives who feel, oh, you're not doing enough. So whether it's not whatever they're doing, it's like desperate moves. But in the end, I think that shutting the government will probably hurt government in a lot of ways. And they tend to love big government, because a lot of people will also say, hey, the government's shutting, I don't care. As long as you keep the Defense Department running and Medicare and Social Security get back to Adam Smith's theory of capitalism, which is basically that government should only have a few roles: defending people, protecting the public green, in other words, the environment where people can invade it. Very few limited roles, and government has massively expanded. So you shut down government, there's a lot of things that people will say, fine, we'll do without it. And the other side is the people who are affected will probably blame the Democrats. Not a good political strategy. I don't think Schumer will go with it for long, but who knows? You know what? We're in crazy times, and might get crazier as the debt keeps putting pressure on everybody. So, all right. Good point. And I don't think it'll disrupt the markets, but I'm not like a market trader. So in the short run, who knows? Maybe credit rating will go down in the United States or whatever. In the long run, it's about fundamentals, and in the long run, they're going to reopen the government. So anyway, thanks for watching Wall Street Hackers. We'll be on September 8th, and then I have to talk to Nick about when I'm coming back, but I think it's October 8th. We'll be on, September 9th week, and then probably back October 8th week. But as soon as the show ends, I'll talk to Nick about whether that's the case or we need another week. All right. Thanks for watching. Like Steve always says,